It was a Tuesday morning when the letter slid under my door. No return address, just my name scrawled in handwriting I hadn't seen in 3 years, my daughter's. For a long moment, I just stared at it, the way you might look at a snake in the grass. My hands trembled before I even touched the envelope, and I'll admit, part of me was afraid to open it. 3 years of silence doesn't end with a casual note. I finally tore it open with my thumb. The words on the page pretended to be warm. Dad, I miss you. Dad, I think about you every day. Dad, I just want to see you again. But there was something in the rhythm of it, something that didn't sound like her. It was too neat, too rehearsed, like a speech written for an audience. And then, halfway down the page, the truth bled through. By the way, I heard you haven't been driving much lately. Maybe you should let me take care of your car. I can handle the registration for you. Put it in my name so you don't have to worry anymore. I read that line 5 times, the words burning hotter each time. She didn't want to see me. She didn't want to reconnect. She wanted my car. The same one I'd worked overtime shifts to buy, the one I kept polished every Saturday morning as if it were a piece of my soul. She wanted to strip me of it, just like she'd stripped me of peace 3 years earlier when she stormed out of my life. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and set it on the kitchen table beside my coffee. I sat there in silence, listening to the tick of the old wall clock. My heart should have been broken, but it wasn't. Not this time. It was something sharper now. Revenge, my boy, is born in moments like these. And as I stared at that envelope, I knew one thing with certainty. She thought she was clever, but she had no idea what I was about to do. I didn't answer her letter right away. No, that would have been too easy, too desperate. I let it sit on the table for 3 full days, untouched, as if I hadn't even noticed it. On the 4th morning, I sat down with my pen and wrote her back in a hand so steady it surprised me. Sweetheart, I've missed you too. I'd be glad to see you. Maybe you can help me out with the car. You're probably right. It's getting harder for me to manage things on my own. I wrote just enough to make her believe I was bending, just enough to make her think she had me wrapped around her finger. Then I mailed it, plain as can be, no hint of what I was really planning. 2 days later, the phone rang. Her number. I almost didn't answer. My blood boiled just looking at it. But I wanted to hear her voice, to measure the lies myself. Hi, Daddy, she said, soft and syrupy. I could picture her smile, that same little curve of the lips she used when she wanted something as a child. I got your letter. I'm so glad you're open to this. I was thinking, maybe I could come over this weekend. We can take a look at the car together. There it was. Straight to the point, not even bothering to disguise it with small talk. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the dust floating in the sunlight from the kitchen window. That sounds fine, I said evenly, though my jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Saturday morning then. She laughed lightly. Perfect. We'll get it all sorted. It'll be so much easier for you once it's in my name. She didn't hear the pause on my end, didn't hear the storm building behind my silence. When the call ended, I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the window, watching the street. She thought she was coming to take something from me. She thought this was going to be the moment she walked away with the keys in her hand and my pride crushed under her heel. But, son, what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that I'd already made arrangements. By the time Saturday came, that car of mine wasn't just a car anymore. It was bait, and she was walking straight into the trap. The night before, I hardly slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the occasional creak of the house settling. I wasn't restless because of fear. No, son. Fear was gone. What kept me awake was calculation. I'd spent years in this house, years with tools in my hands, and I knew exactly what I was going to do. By dawn, I was in the garage. The car sat there under its cover, the shape of it familiar as an old friend. I pulled the cover back slow, revealing its polished curves. I'd cleaned it the day before, every inch shining. But what mattered wasn't the shine. What mattered was what I had hidden beneath the seat. A little envelope of my own, thick with documents she hadn't seen coming. You see, she thought she'd trick me into signing over the car. What she didn't know was that I'd already signed a different set of papers. The title was no longer mine to give. I'd transferred it, but not to her. The name on the new registration would surprise her more than anything else in her life. I won't tell you yet whose name it was. That's for later, when the knife twists. At 9 sharp, her car pulled into the driveway. Not the beat-up little sedan she used to drive, but a flashy SUV, shiny and new, bought, no doubt, with someone else's money. I watched from the window as she stepped out, sunglasses perched on her head, smile stretched wide like she'd already won. She knocked twice before I opened the door. "Daddy," she said, arms open as if the past 3 years had never happened. Her perfume hit me before her embrace, too sweet, too heavy. I let her hug me, stiff as a board, because sometimes you have to play the part. "Come in," I said simply, and she breezed past me into the kitchen as though it were still her home. She glanced at the table, saw the keys waiting there, and her eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "Oh, Daddy, you even have them ready. That's wonderful." I didn't smile. "Let's sit first. We'll talk about it." She perched on the chair, crossing her legs neatly, hands folded in her lap, like she was the picture of patience. But her eyes kept darting back to the keys. "I've already looked into the paperwork," she said quickly, pulling a folder from her purse. "All you need to do is sign. I'll handle the rest. You won't have to worry about anything ever again." I studied her face. The way her mouth tightened at the edges, the way her eyes shone not with love, but with hunger. I nodded slowly, pretending to give in. "All right," I said. "We'll take care of it today." Her smile broke wide. She reached for the keys, fingers brushing against the cold metal. And that's when I set my own envelope on the table. Thick, heavy, waiting. Her smile faltered as she looked at it. "What's that?" she asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. "Something I thought you ought to see before we go any further," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Go ahead. Open it." Her fingers hesitated on the flap. She didn't know it yet, but the game had already turned. Her hand lingered on the envelope like it was burning her skin. I could see it in her face, that little flicker of doubt, that twitch around the mouth that always gave her away. Still, greed is stronger than doubt. She pulled it open and slid the papers out, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against the edges. At first, she didn't understand what she was looking at. Her brow furrowed. Her lips moved as her eyes ran down the page. Then she froze. "Wait, this isn't," her voice caught. She swallowed and tried again. "This isn't a transfer to me." "No," I said calmly, folding my arms across my chest. "It's not." The silence stretched between us. She looked back down at the document, flipping through page after page, her hands trembling now. The name printed bold across the title wasn't hers. It wasn't mine anymore either. "You gave it to," she started, but the rest of the sentence died in her throat. I let her sit with it a while, let the truth settle into her bones. Then I leaned forward, my voice low, steady. "I knew what you were after the moment your letter came. Don't think I didn't see through the act. You thought you could waltz back in here after 3 years, hug me once, and walk out with my car. My car, the one I worked myself raw to buy. You thought wrong." Her lips pressed tight, but her eyes, they told the whole story. Anger, shock, and beneath it all, fear. Not fear of me, no. Fear that the life she imagined was slipping through her fingers. I tapped the papers with one finger. "The car doesn't belong to me anymore. And it damn sure doesn't belong to you. That chapter's closed." Her voice rose sharp, brittle. "You can't do this to me, Dad. You don't know what I've been through. Save it." I cut in, firm but not loud. "You had 3 years to tell me what you'd been through. 3 years when I sat alone at this table, waiting for a letter, a call, anything. You left me with silence, and now you show up because you want a title and a set of keys. That's not family. That's business. And I don't do business with thieves." The words hung heavy in the kitchen. She pushed the papers away like they were poison, her hands shaking too hard to keep up the act anymore. I slid the keys back into my pocket and stood. "You've got two choices," I told her, my voice calm as stone. "Walk out that door with nothing but the purse you came with. Or stay, and hear the rest of the surprise I've set aside for you." Her eyes snapped to mine, wide with suspicion. "What surprise?" I gave her a slow smile. "The kind that changes everything. The kind you'll wish you'd never asked for." She stayed seated, frozen between fury and curiosity. She didn't know it yet, but she was already trapped. She sat there stiff in the chair, eyes darting between me and the documents she couldn't bring herself to touch again. Her jaw tightened, and for a long while she said nothing. Finally, her voice broke the silence, sharp and demanding. "Who did you give it to?" I didn't answer right away. I took my time pouring myself a glass of water, the old pipes groaning as if to underline the weight of the moment. I set the glass down slow, so she had to sit there in the quiet, her nerves gnawing at her from the inside out. Then I leaned forward, elbows on the table. I signed it over to your son. My grandson. The boy you left behind with me when you disappeared. The words hit her harder than a slap. She blinked once, twice, her painted lips parting like she hadn't heard right. Jason? She whispered finally. Yes, Jason, I said. My voice stayed even, but inside I felt something hard and hot, the satisfaction of truth delivered plain. He's the one who's been here. He's the one who helped me wash it every Saturday. He's the one who asked about the oil changes and took notes like it mattered. He cared when you didn't. She shook her head, strands of hair slipping loose around her face. He's just a kid. He doesn't need. He needs a chance. I cut in, my tone sharp enough to make her flinch. A chance to learn responsibility, to value something earned, not stolen. And I'd rather see that car rot in the driveway than let it pass into your hands. Her fists clenched tight against her knees, nails digging into her skin. I could almost see the thoughts racing in her head, how she'd underestimated me, how she'd assumed old age meant weakness. You've made a mistake, she hissed finally. You don't know what you've done. I stood then, tall as my years allowed. No, daughter. For the first time in a long while, I know exactly what I've done. The room was quiet except for the ticking of the clock and her sharp, shallow breathing. I'd given her nothing. Not the car, not pity, not the chance to rewrite her absence with false sweetness. But I had given Jason something, and in that moment, it mattered more than any revenge against her. Still, revenge has a way of finding its way back into a man's bones. And as she sat there seething, I realized this was only the first blow. She'd come for what wasn't hers, and I wasn't about to let her leave without learning what real loss felt like. I slid another envelope onto the table, thinner than the first, but heavier in meaning. You think the car was the prize, I said, my eyes steady on hers. But you don't even know half of it yet. Her eyes narrowed, suspicion fighting with fear. What's in that one? I gave her a small, deliberate smile. That, my girl, is where the real lesson begins. Her eyes darted between me and the envelope lying on the table. Not as thick as the first, but her instincts told her it was dangerous. She reached for it, then stopped, pulling her hand back as though it might bite. Go on, I said, leaning back in my chair. You wanted to handle paperwork. Consider this your chance. Slowly, she slid a finger under the flap and pulled the contents free. Just a few sheets of paper. But sometimes a few sheets weigh more than any stone. The first page was a printout of her bank records. Line after line of withdrawals she thought I'd never see. I'd gotten hold of them through a lawyer friend, the kind of man who owes favors and doesn't ask too many questions. The pattern was obvious, money flowing out faster than it ever came in. Gambling, shopping, little weekend trips she couldn't afford. She skimmed the first page, her face tightening, then moved to the second. That's where her breath caught, because the second page wasn't numbers. It was a copy of a police report. A night 3 years back, when she'd been picked up for driving under the influence and only escaped serious charges because she'd given a false name and slipped away before the paperwork stuck. Her eyes widened, her hand snapping to her mouth as though she could swallow the evidence whole. Where did you get this? She whispered. I told you, I said evenly. I've had time. Time to sit in this house while you disappeared. Time to dig through what you left behind. Time to learn exactly who my daughter became. She pushed the papers back toward me, as if by rejecting them she could erase them. But I didn't take them. I left them sitting there between us like a wall of truth she couldn't climb. You wanted my car? I continued, my voice low but firm. You wanted me to hand over the last thing I've worked for like I was some fool too old to notice? Well, you don't get the car, and now you don't get peace either. Because every lie you've lived, every secret you've tucked away, I've got them right here. Her face flushed crimson, her breathing sharp and uneven. You wouldn't, she said, her voice trembling. You wouldn't do this to your own daughter. I leaned forward, resting my hands flat on the table, my eyes never leaving hers. You stopped being my daughter the day you traded love for greed. What I'll do now depends on how you walk out that door today. The room was silent except for the tick of the wall clock. She looked at the envelope, then at me, then at the door. Trapped. She wanted to shout, to curse, to claw the papers to pieces. But she knew better. I'd taken the upper hand back, and she couldn't stand it. But son, here's the thing. That wasn't the end. I still had one more move, one she didn't see coming. She sat there longer than I expected, fingers curled around the thin edge of the table, as if she could steady herself by gripping wood. Pride, I've learned, is a stubborn thing. It keeps a person waiting for an apology that will never come, for the face of a father who will melt at the sight of tears. But I'd been through that theater once too often. You still haven't told me what else you have, she said finally, voice a whisper that scraped like gravel. You said there was one more thing. What is it? I gave her a small smile, gentle, the kind my wife used to give when she wanted to soften a hard truth. You want the truth? I asked. You paved the way for it. You opened the door with your own hand. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a thin spiral notebook I'd kept tucked in the drawer of my desk for years. It was ordinary, coffee-stained at the corners, pages worn at the edges. People who know me know I like to write things down. Names, dates, little details that usually get forgotten. I set it on the table between us. Her eyes narrowed. What's that? It's a record, I said, of the last 3 years. Entries about when you showed up, what you wanted, who you brought, when you left, the lies you told when you promised you were only gone for a little while. I wrote down phone numbers you used, the name of the lawyer who helped you escape that charge 3 years ago, the names of the people I've had to call to fix the trouble you left behind. She laughed, a short, ugly sound. You kept a diary? Not a diary. I tapped the cover with my knuckle. A ledger. Evidence, if you want to call it that. If you think the car was the prize, this is the map of the reasons you don't get to take what you didn't earn. Her thumb worried the corner of the notebook as if she could erase what it contained by rubbing it away. You wouldn't. You always underestimate me, I said. Maybe because you prefer weak fathers, easier to take advantage of. But I learned a lot in the 3 years you weren't here. I learned who helped you, who covered for you, where the money went. And I learned how to make the kind of calls a man needs to make when someone he loved decides profit matters more than family. She snapped the notebook toward her as if to snatch it and rip it up. Give it to me, she hissed. Give it to me. I'll pay you back for whatever you think I took. Just hand it over. I let her have it, let her feel the false power for a few seconds. She flipped pages as if searching for a line that would absolve her. There wasn't one. There were names she didn't expect to see. Men she used to flirt with at parties, the number of the stranger who wired money to her account last summer, even a note I'd made after hearing her on the phone talking in a place I'd finally traced to a hotel downtown. You think you can scare me with notes? She said, voice rising. You're pathetic. That's when I reached for my phone. I didn't call the police. I didn't raise my voice. What I did was quieter and colder. I called 2 numbers. One I'd promised myself I'd never use again. The other I'd kept for a time like this. I left one message, and I didn't hurry the other. The first call was to the law office of the lawyer she'd leaned on the night she'd almost been charged. I left the facts as plainly as a man can. Her name, the date of the night in question, a note that I had copies of the police incident report and the forged ID used that evening. I told them I'd be happy to share everything if they wanted to preserve the firm's reputation or, failing that, they might want to advise her to come clean before the ledger went somewhere public. The second call went to Jason's school. I spoke to the principal and explained, in careful, measured sentences, that there were some family matters Jason's school might want to be aware of. Nothing obscene, nothing illegal, just the truth that his mother had been absent, that I was taking steps to secure some stability for him, and that there might be questions about recent withdrawals on accounts and sudden transfers involving the boy's name. I didn't threaten. I asked for help. Counseling resources, a point person at the school who might keep an eye on the boy if needed. I gave them my name and promised to stay in touch. Throughout both calls, I watched her face. Her eyes tracked my movements, the color draining slowly until it matched the gray of the winter light coming through the kitchen window. When I hung up, I put the phone down like a man who'd just set a trap and adjusted the bait. You called them, she said. Accusation, disbelief, pride, all wrapped into a question. I did, I said, because I care more about that child than I do about scaring you. You walked away from him. You walked away from this, expecting nothing to be asked of you for it. I decided he shouldn't have to pay for your mistakes. You wouldn't send them to my boss, she said, voice shaking. You wouldn't tell anyone at my office. I'd lose everything. There are ways to protect kids without destroying lives, I replied. I'm not here to ruin you. I'm here to make sure you can't take what you didn't earn and keep walking. If you want to fix this, you can start by telling the truth. To me, to Jason, to the people who matter. If you come clean and start making amends, there's room to fix things. If you run, I'll make sure the ledger finds a few desks that will ask questions you won't like. She pressed her palms flat on the table, as if to push the air out of me. Her breath came fast now, a rhythm of panic I'd never heard from her as a child. You're blackmailing me, she spat. No, I said slowly. I'm presenting choices. You asked for my car by pretending to want me. I gave you the chance to be better for the boy before doing something worse. You can stay and answer for what you've done, or you can go. But if you go, I'll make sure the people who need to know about what you hid hear about it from someone they trust. She stared at me, at the notebook, at the phone. The corner of the room seemed to hold its breath with us. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled by, ordinary life moving on. At last she pushed back from the table so fast a chair scraped. She grabbed her purse with hands that trembled so badly I thought she might drop it. You're a monster, she said, voice breaking until there was nothing but a child in its timbre. Maybe, I answered. Or maybe I'm a man who finally decided to do the right thing for the right reasons. You left us, and I've been living with what that meant for 3 years. Maybe I'm late. Maybe I'm harsh. But I'm not wrong. She stormed toward the door, slamming it so hard the glass rattled in the frame. The engine in her SUV fired with a roar that seemed too loud for such a fragile, furious person. She reached into the car, hands still shaking, and I could see her fingers fumbling with the keys. She looked back through the windshield, once, and for a flash I saw every decision she'd made pass across her expression, the nights of easy money, the long silences, the cruelty of absence. Then she started to pull away. I walked to the window and watched her back down the driveway. She stopped at the curb, phone in her hand, and began to dial. I don't know who she was calling. I don't know if it was the lawyer, the man who bought her a new life, or someone from a past I hadn't mapped out on paper. I stood there, hands folded, breath steady, and I felt both a victory and a fear I hadn't expected to feel, because when you tip over someone's life, sometimes it splatters you with the pieces. Her phone rang. 1 ring. 2. The 3rd ring cut off as she hit the speaker, voice loud and trembling. Hello, she said. On the other end, someone answered. A voice I couldn't hear from here. Her face changed, pleading, coiling, raw. She muttered something into the phone, something that made the color leave her face and the SUV's windows fog like a mirror. The SUV idled in my driveway, exhaust curling into the cool air. I stood by the front window, my hands braced against the sill, watching her shadow move inside the vehicle. She sat there for a long minute, shoulders stiff, head bent over her purse like she was digging through the last scraps of her pride. Then, sudden and deliberate, the engine cut off. The silence rang louder than the motor. She opened the door, heels striking the concrete with sharp, angry clicks. When she pushed the door open again, she didn't look like the daughter I'd raised. She looked like someone bracing for a war. In her hand wasn't a weapon, not in the usual sense. It was worse. She carried a thick envelope, stuffed until it bulged, sealed with tape. She slapped it down on my kitchen table, so hard the clock on the wall rattled. There, she said, breath ragged. That's every dime I have left. You wanted to humiliate me? Fine. Take it. Just leave me alone. I didn't touch it. I didn't even glance down. I kept my eyes on hers, steady, unflinching. I never asked for your money, I said. You think this was about dollars? This was about honesty. About the boy you left. About what kind of person you've decided to become. Her lip trembled, but pride stiffened it quick. You think you're a saint? You think you can lecture me? You've made mistakes too, Dad. You weren't always there. You weren't perfect. No, I said, my voice low but certain. I wasn't perfect, but I never walked away. That landed. I saw it in her eyes, the flicker of truth she couldn't dodge. She spun away, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. So what now, she spat. You going to take this to the cops? You going to ruin me at work? You want me crawling on my knees begging for forgiveness? I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. No, what I want is simple. You show up for your son. You face the mess you've made without dragging anyone else into it. You stop pretending you can lie your way back into my good graces for the sake of a damn car. Her fists clenched at her sides, nails biting into her skin. She opened her mouth to shout, but the words caught. Instead, She sank into the chair across from me, face crumpling in a way I hadn't seen since she was a child. Not the slick manipulator, not the greedy stranger, just a broken woman who'd finally run out of lies. The silence between us stretched long and heavy. The only sound was the steady tick of the wall clock, the same clock that had marked every meal, every argument, every memory in this house. She finally whispered, "You've already decided, haven't you? Whatever I say, you've already closed the door on me." I didn't answer right away. I wanted her to feel that silence, to know it wasn't anger holding my tongue, but the weight of years she couldn't erase with one desperate visit. When I spoke, my words were slow, deliberate. "The door isn't locked, but you don't walk back through it with tricks and demands. You want me in your life? You want that boy to have a family worth his trust? Then you start by admitting the truth. All of it. Not to me. To him." Her eyes widened. "To Jason?" "Yes," I said. "To Jason. He deserves to hear who his mother really is, from her own mouth, not from whispers and rumors." The color drained from her face. That, son, was the true blow. She'd thought the worst was losing the car, or me exposing her secrets. She hadn't expected I'd demand she expose herself, raw, unguarded, in front of the very child she'd abandoned. She rose to her feet, gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles whitened. "You're asking me to destroy myself in front of him," she said. I shook my head slowly. "No, I'm asking you to start over honest. He'll decide what to do with the truth. That's the only chance you've got left." She stood frozen, torn between rage and collapse. The envelope of money sat untouched on the table, heavy with everything she thought could buy her way back. And just then, as if fate itself wanted to remind us this wasn't over, the sound of a key rattled at the front door. Jason had come home early. The sound of the lock turning was like a gunshot. She froze by the table, color draining from her cheeks, while I stayed in my chair, steady as stone. A second later, Jason stepped in, his backpack slung over one shoulder, hair messy from the wind outside. He kicked his shoes off without looking up, just like he always did. "Grandpa, you home?" he called, voice easy, trusting. "I'm here, son," I said, my voice low but calm. Then he saw her. His steps faltered, and for a moment he just stood there, staring. The room felt like it had stopped breathing. "Mom?" he said, the word sharp with surprise. "What are you doing here?" She looked at him like a deer caught in headlights, her mouth opening, but no sound coming out. For the first time all morning, she wasn't rehearsed, wasn't polished. She was bare. I motioned toward the chair beside me. "Jason, sit down. Your mother has something to tell you." Her eyes snapped to mine, wide with panic, but I didn't flinch. She'd run out of escapes. The only path left was through. Jason dropped his backpack to the floor and sat slowly, suspicion clouding his young face. "What's going on?" I leaned back, giving her the space she'd begged me not to give. "Go on," I said to her. "Tell him." Her hands trembled as she picked up the envelope of money, then set it back down as if it weighed 100 pounds. She tried to speak once, twice, but nothing came. Finally, her voice cracked into the silence. "Jason," she began, eyes glistening, "I haven't been honest with you. About where I've been. About what I've done. I left you. I left your grandfather. I thought I could fix my life without looking back, but I made it worse. And today, I came here to take something that wasn't mine. I wanted to trick him into signing over his car." Jason stared, his mouth tightening. "Why?" She shook her head, tears spilling now. "Because I was selfish. Because I thought about myself and not about you. I thought if I had something, anything, it would fill the hole I'd made. But it doesn't. It never will. And that's the truth." The room went still. Jason didn't move. He didn't speak. He just looked at her, his young face carved with something too old for his years. Finally, he turned to me. "Grandpa, is that true?" I nodded once. "It's true." Jason dropped his gaze, staring at his hands in his lap. For a long while, silence reigned, broken only by the clock ticking on the wall. Then he stood up. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Mom," he said quietly. "But at least now I know the truth." He grabbed his backpack and headed toward his room without another word. She collapsed into the chair, sobbing into her hands. I let her cry. I didn't offer comfort. Not yet. Comfort comes after work, after years of it, not after one confession. When her tears slowed, I finally spoke. "You see? That's what honesty costs. Pain, doubt, but also a chance. You gave him that today. Don't throw it away again. She looked at me, eyes red, voice hoarse. Do you think he'll ever forgive me? I stood, tucking the keys into my pocket. That's between you and him. I've played my part. And with that, I left her sitting at the table, surrounded by the evidence of her own choices. The papers, the envelope of money, the silence of a boy retreating to his room. I stepped out onto the porch, breathing in the cool air. The world outside carried on as if nothing had happened. Cars passed, birds sang, neighbors waved from across the street. But inside my house, something had shifted forever. Whether it was the start of healing or just the final break, son, I can't tell you. Some stories don't end neat. They end open, like a door waiting to see who will walk back through. And that's how it was left. Me with the car, Jason with the truth, and her with the weight of her own making. Sometimes revenge isn't fire or fury. Sometimes it's just the mirror you hold up, forcing someone to see what they've become. That was enough.